Dakota Teepee First Nation struggles to contain the drug crisis in their community. Father and son arrested in Toronto on terror charges. Canada has approved $107 million in military equipment export permits to Israel. Protests in Nigeria against inflation and petroleum subsidies. And the Wagner Group experiences its first massive losses in Mali. Good morning. It's Friday, August 2nd. I'm Nora. Here are your headlines. We start this morning at the Dakota Teepee First Nation, where the Band Council is trying to evict 9 people for selling or using drugs. Sierra Betenis with APTN News reports that it's a desperate measure as the Band Council tries to battle back the drug crisis in their community. Chief Dennis Pesh says this, quote, "We have to struggle for our people to survive, for our young people. It's tough having to bury a lot of young people, and we have another funeral to go. We're in a war against drugs, and we're losing that war," unquote. Nearly every member of the community has lost someone to the drug crisis, and the community isn't getting enough help from either level of government. They don't have the resources to deal with it. The eviction notices aren't the first step, though. Anyone who's found to be using or dealing drugs in the community is first given a warning and the option to be connected to treatment services. Then, if they keep using drugs or dealing drugs, they're moved to a voucher program so that they have to buy food with vouchers rather than money. While science shows that this kind of forced treatment approach does not stop someone from using drugs, it's clear that the community is in crisis and trying to manage it. But the community is also trying to find other ways to help people. They've rented a bed and breakfast that they hope to turn into a treatment center that deals with people's trauma and reconnects them to the land. But they need more help from government to turn their plans into reality. They're also desperate for more healthcare professionals in the community. Next to a story about a terror plot in Toronto. CBC News' Adam Carter is reporting that Ahmed Fouad Mustafa El-Didi and Mustafa El-Didi, father and son, were both charged with terrorism. But yesterday, they both denied that the son, Mustafa El-Didi, had anything to do with the terror plot. They are both charged for planning to do a terror plot on behalf of ISIS in Toronto. In their court appearance, both spoke through court interpreters who, by the way, can I digress a second? The folks who are hired to provide the simultaneous live translation in Canadian courts are all freelancers. They get no job benefits and their wages are low, and they have to be on their best behavior so that they stay on the court interpreters list. They have to go through security screening, even though they're court workers, and it wastes tons of time. Many of them are members of my union, the Canadian Freelance Union, and the way that they are treated just shows how rotten the justice system really is. Things truly are held together with spit and old tape, and it's not sustainable. Anyway, the father and son were speaking through a translator, and they were arrested in a hotel in Richmond Hill. Police had been investigating them for a month. They're accused of planning a terror plot, but the public doesn't have a right to know the nature of the plot. That is hidden by a publication ban. In the hotel room, they had with them an axe and a machete. The police claim that the fact that they had an axe and machete was proof that the police managed to just at the last minute foil their mass murder plot, which we can't hear about it because they successfully got a publication ban on it. The two will be represented by legal aid, meaning they don't have the money or resources to get themselves lawyers. Now, Global News has a lot more detail about this pair and their alleged connections to ISIS. The CBC story ends there. Global is reporting that the father appeared in an ISIS video in 2015, filmed outside of Canada, where he's seen dismembering someone with a sword. The Global News team watched and described the video, but Global does not say that they are confident that the man in the video is El-Didi, just that his face flashes briefly towards the camera and he, quote, appears to be a middle-aged man with a henna-tinted beard, unquote. A henna-tinted beard, just so you know, I had to look that one up, means a beard that has a rusty orange tint. But they don't confirm that they are sure that it's El-Didi. Anyway, because of the nature of how political and fraught terrorism investigations are, there is a higher level of duty of transparency with this case that I don't suspect the Crown to rise to. I know someone who was kept in a secluded room like a hotel and was arrested on terror charges after 3 days of being in this room. That was in New York City, and it was a total setup. I'll personally need to hear much more before I believe the police alone on these details. Next, it seems that Canada is on track to exporting almost $95 million in military goods to Israel within the next 18 months. This reporting comes from Emma Paling at The Maple. Paling noticed the detail in a document that was published online for the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development's study into Israeli military exports. Back on January 8th, Justin Trudeau claimed that Canada had stopped approving new export permits for military goods that were heading to Israel, but existing permits were allowed to continue. At the time, there were $107.7 million worth of active permits for military exports open until December 2025. While it isn't explicit that all the exports will end up in the hands of the IDF, at least one permit is destined to Israel's Ministry of Defense. And also, it doesn't really matter because once they're in Israel, we have no control over where they go or how they are used. Global Affairs Canada didn't answer the questions that the Maple posed to them, asking to clarify vague and inconsistent data in the document. The names of the companies that have these export permits are not included in the document. Now to international news and first to Nigeria. Protests are happening across that country and people are fighting back against rapidly increasing inflation and a rapidly devalued currency. The movement is called End Bad Governance in Nigeria. I wonder if we can borrow that in Canada. And it's become a hashtag and a rallying cry. Food inflation has increased by 40% and fuel prices have tripled. That's the result of reforms that the president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, introduced a while back. The reforms were hoping to boost the economy. Protesters in Abuja and Kano have had tear gas shot at them. Ismail Olushola Oladare, an activist, said this, quote, "The police are brutalizing the Nigerian people and people want that to stop. Today, this particular protest and bad governance protest is about the standard of living of people," unquote. The protesters have 19 demands. Al Jazeera notes that the most important one is for an end to a state subsidy on petroleum products, which they say has triggered the crisis. And finally, 84 Wagner Group fighters and 47 Malian soldiers were killed by separatists, according to news coming from the separatists themselves in Mali. The fighting happened near the Algerian border. The separatists want an independent homeland for the Tuareg Berber people. The homeland they seek is an area that covers the northern half of Mali and northern and western Niger. Failure to keep peace and increase security in the region is what triggered the UN and French troops to be kicked out by both countries. The separatists say they lost 9 fighters and taken 7 people hostage. The group is connected to Jamal Nusrat al-Islam Muslimin, a group connected to al-Qaeda, reports The Voice of America. Their report is based on news from Agence France Presse, which couldn't confirm the details coming from the rebel group. But if true, it would be the biggest losses for the Wagner Group in any African deployment, and the Malian government said that they had experienced heavy losses. The separatists also said they killed more than 50 civilians who were Nigerian, Sudanese, and Chadian in Burkina Faso, warning that country to not get involved in the fighting. Those are your headlines for Friday, August 2nd. I'm Nora. You know, it's Friday. That means not just that this is the weekend, but it's the start of my vacation. Today's the last episode of the Daily News until we're back in full force in September. We'll be back right after Labor Day. I've already heard from so many of you who are like, oh, we're going to miss the Daily News so much. You know what? I'm going to miss it too, but I'm not going to miss traveling everywhere with my microphone and my computer. I actually don't have to take my microphone with me, which is really cool because I usually take it literally everywhere I go. Watch this. I'm saying this now and something's going to come up and I'm going to need my microphone. I'm going to be kicking myself. But I am taking the next couple of weeks off. I need it. It will be a well-enjoyed break. I also want to mention, of course, this this podcast, not Sandy nor the main podcast, but this podcast does have writing help from someone who prefers not to get the attention, which is totally their call. So I want to acknowledge them and their work, which has been steadfast and amazing in the last couple of months. And I look forward to us working together again in September. And just so you know, we've got a whole new look coming in September, and the goal with the Daily News podcast is to broadcast this to a way bigger audience. While you're off from us, I'm off from you. I have to say thank you so much for your support. Thank you for tuning in every day. Thanks to the folks that have switched to the new feed. Those who haven't yet, you're going to have to once September comes. Your support is what makes this continue. Your support is what keeps me going in the media landscape that we have. And compiling the daily news every day means that I watch directly how bad the news has gotten out there. And luckily, I am able to highlight stories like from the Maple, like from APTN and other independent or alternative news sources. And I'm very, very honored to be able to do that. So you make this possible because you listen. You make this possible through your donations, through your support, through your sharing it. And I could not thank you enough. You're listening to this podcast at sandyandnora.com, on the Real News Network podcast feed, and anywhere you get your podcasts. I hope you have a wonderful August. And I'll see you on the other side.